Okay, everyone. So today we're going to talk about vaccination programs. Now that we talked about the different diseases that can affect the horses, we started with respiratory diseases, we went through neurologic diseases and GI tract related diseases. And we talked about different drugs that we use on horses, as well as international transportation of horses, how inflammation happens and everything. So today we're going to talk about the different vaccines that we can give to horses and different vaccination programs that we can give, that we can administer to different horses based on their use, their gender, their age, etc. Okay, so the AAP, the American Association of Equine Practitioners, actually several years ago, 2007, came up with list of diseases that they consider that every horse needs to be vaccinated against, and some diseases that they feel are what they call, and the one that every horse needs to be vaccinated against is called the core list of vaccines. And then they also have one that's called risk-based vaccines, which is for horses. Then it's going to depend on the use of the horse, the age, the gender, etc. So let me share the screen here with you just so you can see how we get this information. So here we are. So just go to theaep.org. It's a website that I would like all of you to be aware and acquainted with it, okay? Because there's a lot of things here that you guys can use for your future lives as well. So that's funny because this is what it's showing up right now. So when we go to the AEP.org, we go to their resources tab, which is what I just did there. And in the resources tab, there's going to be a bunch of things. But what we are going to do to find the vaccination schedule is going to be guidelines and policy statements. So we go there. And then when we are on that page, we are going to go here. There's a bunch of guidelines, okay, that the AEP suggests. And then we're going to go to the vaccination guidelines, which is the last one on that, on the left corner there. And there's going to be different things that we've been talking about throughout. So the principles of vaccination, we've been touching about this in all the lectures that we do, infectious disease control, different things that we do. And then they're going to have here the core vaccination guidelines, which we can click. This is not the page that I want you guys to go, because here they're going to explain the diseases, okay, that are part of the core and a little bit of each of the disease. Then the risk-based vaccines are going to be right here. But what we're going to do is there's full vaccination chart and there is adult horse vaccination chart. And we're going to click on the adult horse vaccination chart, and it is PDFs, okay? So there's going to be first the core vaccines, and then later on we're going to have the risk-based vaccine. So just to touch, guys, this is going to be a short lecture. But in the core list of vaccines, like I said, we're going to have 5 diseases: tetanus, rabies, Eastern and Western encephalitis, and West Nile virus, okay? So here you're going to see how to read this chart, and it's like this. So here's going to be the diseases, different types of horses, and how to do with one of them. So brood mares, and then other adult horses, so over a year of age, and with known vaccination history, and then other adult horses with unknown, if they are unvaccinated, or if you don't know the vaccination history, you bought them from or adopted them without knowing what their vaccination history was. And then some of the comments that the AAP has deemed necessary to add. So as you guys can see here, tetanus is one of the simplest disease to prevent in horses. Like I said, horses are the most sensitive animals to tetanus. And as you can see here for brood mares, let me see if I can write this, hold on. You are going to vaccinate brood mares if they are previously vaccinated. No, I can't write. Okay. If they're previously vaccinated, you're just going to booster their tetanus vaccine 4 to 6 weeks prepartum. If they're not vaccinated, you're going to give 2 doses, one several weeks before the prepartum, and then the second dose 4 weeks after the first dose, which is how you do any horse as you start. So you give the first dose and then you give the second dose 30 to 45 days after the first dose. For adult horses that you know are vaccinated, tetanus is an annual vaccine, okay? Same goes for West Nile, okay? It's an annual vaccine. Rabies, it's an annual vaccine. Rabies is a vaccine that you start with a single dose. You don't booster the rabies vaccine in horses. You like generally vaccine, you have to start with 2 or 3 initial doses. Rabies, you just give at 6 months of age and then annually. Okay, and then we have here Eastern and Western equine encephalitis, and that plus West Nile are diseases that, as we remember, are going to be transmitted by the bite of mosquitoes. Okay, so that's how the disease is going to happen. So just thinking about this, when is the best time to give these vaccines to horses, and we're going to stimulate the antibodies at a key time of their lives. And mosquitoes, as we all know, they start to become more prevalent in the spring and then summer and fall. So it's important to booster this vaccine. So you see here, annual, spring, prior to the onset of vector season. So this is a type of vaccine. If you're going to separate the vaccines between spring and fall, this is one that you're going to give in the spring, say like March. Okay, so when April comes, when May comes, the horse's level of antibodies is at its highest, because as you guys remember, with time the antibodies are going to decay from the blood circulation. Okay, in the case of Eastern and Western encephalitis and West Nile, some states have this disease, are more prevalent than other states for these diseases. So some of the states, and it's what it says here, consider 6 months revaccination interval for horses that reside in endemic areas such as Florida, okay, for Eastern encephalitis, and horses that are immunocompromised, so horses that you know are not going to respond very well to vaccines. Okay, consider again 6 months revaccination interval for this particular horses here, because they may be at a higher risk for this disease. And unlike, say, tetanus, rabies, these 2 diseases elicit a strong immune response, so the antibodies are not going to decay as fast as these other guys here. Okay, in the risk-based vaccines, we're going to have anthrax, botulism, we're going to have flu, rhino, EVA, okay, flu, rhino, EVA, lepto, Potomac horse fever, rotavirus, strangles are going to be the ones that are most common. Okay, anthrax, there's only a few places in the country that actually have this disease, so most of the people don't have to vaccinate for this, because this is not a disease that affects horses everywhere in the United States. For botulism, if you guys remember from the class, it's going to depend. So broodmares, because of the Shaker-Foe syndrome, they should be vaccinated 4 to 6 weeks prepartum. If you live in Kentucky, all horses here should, if they're going to be outside, especially if they're going to be eating hay outside, they should be vaccinated for botulism, even if they are not pregnant mares. Okay, so they're going to we start botulism with a 3-dose series, and then it's an annual revaccination. Herpes, and so herpes, as it comes to abortion, which is equine herpes type 1, you have to give to brood mares. So here the recommendation is 5, 7, and 9 months of gestation. And to prevent the abortion, some people do 3, 5, 7, and 9 months of gestation to prevent the abortion. But this is just the pneumabort and the other vaccines that are labeled for abortion. Now, for the respiratory disease, rhino, pneumonitis, and influenza, they should be administered to horses that are entering competition. So show horses, horses that travel and go to trail rides where multiple horses from different areas are going to come together in the same place. Race horses, for example, the USEF, if you're going to show in their shows, you have to vaccinate against flu and rhino every 6 months. So you have to show proof of those vaccinations for them. Some racetracks have that mandated as well, in that some racetracks is every 4 months for rhino. So it's going to depend on the job that the horse has. Now, a horse that never leaves the farm is never going to have contact with anybody outside of the farm, possibly, and is not pregnant, possibly doesn't need to have vaccine for rhino and flu, okay, if they're never going to leave the farm, but they do need to have the core vaccines for sure, okay, but flu and rhino may not be 100% necessary. But it's something for you to think about, because if you have horses commingling, they're together with these horses, so show horses that come back and share the same pasture with horses that live in the farm and never leave because they're retired, you may want to booster and vaccinate them for flu rhino as well, just because these show horses may be bringing these diseases back home. EVA, okay, EVA in Kentucky, you have to vaccinate the thoroughbred stallions against EVA. Okay, that's a mandate for Kentucky. If you're going to breed, if you have a mare that you're going to breed to a horse that has EVA, it's important to vaccinate her before breeding to her. And before you start vaccinating stallions, so there's a lot of stallions, like warm bloods and standardbreds have a high percentage of them are EVA positive. It's just that before you are going to vaccinate a stallion against EVA, you have to show that he is seronegative, because then once you start vaccinating an animal, it's impossible to know when you do serology to know if that's because of the disease or if that's because of vaccine. So before vaccinating an animal for that, you have to do serology to prove that. So it's written right here to prove that they were negative, and their antibodies when doing serology is going to be because of vaccination. So EVA, this is what we are going to do. Lepto, it is going to, remember I talked a little bit about lepto and how to prevent horses from getting it. So generally it's contaminated water that gives lepto, and it is it's important for horses not to drink waters from stream. It's much better for horses to drink water that is coming from a well that's not contaminated, or city water. Okay, so stream, ponds, it becomes a problem. So in that case, lepto, it may not be totally necessary. It is good for pregnant mares. Okay, so it's going to depend. This is something you need to contact your veterinarian to see if it's something that he or she recommends or not. We talked about rotavirus. So if you guys remember rotavirus, I'm going to come back to Potomac horse fever here in a second. But rotavirus, if you guys remember that, pregnant mares are the only animals that are going to be vaccinated for this, because they don't shed the virus. No one knows how the foals get the virus. It's probably because of the environment. And they are the only ones that are going to get this, because the disease that only affects foals. And once these foals are like 5 months and older, they're not at risk anymore. So therefore, they don't need to be vaccinated for rotavirus. Potomac horse fever. If your horse is going to be drinking from streams, if your horse is going to be drinking, it's going to live close to an area that's a lot of aquatic insects, so a lot of water bodies around, a lot of aquatic insects. So for Potomac horse fever, I personally prefer to do a management, in that you make sure that there is no aquatic insects in the water buckets or water troughs. Don't drink from stream, have treated water, and I prefer that over vaccinating, because the vaccine doesn't work 100%, okay? The vaccine may be something that you can vaccinate, but it's something that may not totally work, because there's different serovars for the Potomac horse fever. Strangles, I'm not going to talk about snake bite, because this is something that is because the veterinarian is going to suggest that or not. and this is not an infectious disease, so not my expertise. So strangles, so Streptococcus equi, there's different types of vaccine. There's the killed vaccine, and then there's the attenuated live vaccine. And the attenuated live vaccine is intranasal. So like I said, when we're talking about strangles, we just need to make sure that these horses, when receiving these vaccines that are intranasal, because they are live, so the veterinarian hopefully is wearing gloves. And then if he's going to vaccinate other horses in the muscle, intramuscularly, he should change gloves, because there's going to be live bacteria in his hands. And then if he goes and vaccinates another horse, there's a risk of introducing live pus forming bacteria into the neck of the horse and leading to the formation of abscesses. So strangles is something that your veterinarian, if you live in an area where strangles is common, is something that the veterinarian will want to vaccinate as well. So this was for the adult. Okay, I'm going back there just so we can see what it is for the full vaccination chart. And it's very similar. It's the same diseases, but just if the mares were vaccinated, or if the foals are from mares that are not vaccinated, or that you don't know the vaccine, the vaccination history of the mare. So like I said, there is multiple things in that AAEP website that is important for you all to be acquainted with the website. There's going to be different regulations, different guidelines, and I would really, really like for you guys to be acquainted with that, so it can be a source of information for you. There is white papers about different things there, about equine welfare, etc. But about vaccinations and the guidelines for the vaccines that we have available, and the vaccines that the AAP says every horse should receive, as opposed to different horses receiving other vaccines, that's where we get the information from. Now, there's a new vaccine that covers all 5 of the vaccines. They're called ECCOR or COR-EC. I don't remember, but it's from Zoetis, and it has the 5 diseases that the AAP deems or calls a core vaccine. So if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, but this is the chart for vaccinations. Thank you.